If music be the food of love, play on. The Justice for Jazz Artists campaign has marched in the Big Apple to tell club owners that musicians want them to provide pension, pay scales, and protections for all musicians. On a similar note, the OWS Guitarmy have rallied to answer Jay-Z's questions on the movement there. In Washington, Occupy DC's first anniversary and shut down K Street actions targeted the banks to protest the financiers' coup d'etat against the 99%. Across the U.S., Occupy LA's first anniversary to demonstrate its presence in a shared nationwide struggle to make another world possible has made its mark, along with Pasadena's anti-foreclosure mill action. Occupy the Hood Milwaukee has rallied to highlight that a young man of color is twice more likely to be killed on America's mean streets compared to a U.S. soldier fighting wars abroad, and OWS Week has faithfully continued its watchful vigil to give voice to an uprising the corporate media would rather forget. Occupy Wall Street followed up their anniversary celebration in New York doing what they do best, helping members of their community. Occupiers joined the Justice for Jazz Artists campaign for a march by musicians and jazz fans on September 27th, asking a popular club's owners to do the right thing and provide pensions, pay scales, and protections on recordings for all musicians.
We're out here because of the general perfect storm of corruption that built this arena. Basically, the Ratner developers going in with Barclays Bank and Jay-Z, who doesn't totally understand Occupy. We printed out a little flyer for him in his own words.
Oh yeah, let me take a look.
Yeah, so that he can understand Occupy.
The next day saw the OWS Guitarmy occupy Barclays Center for a Jay-Z teach-in, providing a sincere answer to the musicians' criticism of the movement.
Why am I here today? I'm protesting the Barclays Center.
What's wrong with the Barclays Center?
What's that?
What's wrong?
Well, what's wrong with it? How does it benefit us, regular people like me?
You tell me.
That's the question people got to start asking. We put in money into this. They destroyed a part of the city for this thing, and it really isn't going to benefit the people at large. It benefits people that have a lot of money, that are in charge of corporations and whatnot like that. And we don't need this in New York. What we need is things that people can use: housing, schools. I was reading an article in the paper this morning where there's kind of warehousing kids because they got no place to put them. The schools are too crowded. The money they spend on this, how many schools could they have built with that? How many playgrounds? How many after-school programs for kids? Our priorities in this country are all wrong these days. It needs to be different. We need to think about who things are benefiting. This is not going to benefit us, okay? Basically where it's at.
Over in Pasadena, California, Occupy LA and Occupy Fights Foreclosures joined for an anti-foreclosure mill action. Foreclosure mill is the term coined back in the 2009 banking mortgage crisis for law and real estate firms which capitalized on the nation's housing crash, participating in robo-signing of mortgages and gaming the courts as they routinely falsified paperwork to push borrowers out of their homes as quickly and profitably as possible. The action in Pasadena was directed at a major foreclosure mill mogul who, when confronted by a homeowner whose house he had taken, just smiled. Occupy Los Angeles held its first anniversary celebration from September 29th through October 1st. Tents reappeared as Solidarity Park was reoccupied, and the call went out from OLA to everyone who seeks a better, more egalitarian world to join them and stand united in shared struggles. Protesters came together to remember their successful occupation of City Hall on October 1, 2011, and the paramilitary operation of 1,400 police officers who raided their encampment on November 30th, successfully evicting peaceful assemblers. The anniversary events were meant to convey to the world that OLA is still occupying the streets in solidarity with the most disenfranchised, still organizing for change and resistance in the face of mounting political repression. OLA points out that not much has changed. Same corruption, celebrity politics, media disinformation, surveillance, politics of fear, war, deportations, and insufficient answers from the ruling elite. Where is equality and justice? Nowhere. So OLA is here to stay. A year ago, brave activists in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., were inspired by the 99%ers occupying Wall Street to occupy McPherson Square on K Street, the corridor where corporate lobbyists, bankers, and the 1% come to wield their power. On October 6th, more fearless members of the 99% occupied Freedom Plaza in downtown D.C. 2 active camps were inhabited by several hundred occupiers. They survived the snow and rain of winter and persecution by police and were violently raided and evicted in February 2012. This October 1st, DC 99ers and allies let it be known they are still alive and kicking as Occupy DC shut down K Street to celebrate their first anniversary. Their message? Wealthy elites have hijacked our political system and continue to diminish our livelihoods. Politicians still pander to corporate lobbyists who are intent on crushing any resistance of the people. K Street is where they write legislation to bust unions, allow corporate takeover of our environments and communities, and enact draconian national security measures. The banks on Wall Street use K Street as their conduit to conduct a financial coup d'etat of a country sustained and maintained by the 99%. DC occupiers marched through the city and stopped at J.P. Morgan Chase, British Petroleum, Monsanto, and several development companies which have raised low-income housing projects in the city to build expensive condos and apartments. The October 1st action kicks off a week of signature Occupy actions, highlighting the major issues still facing the 99%.
Go, baby.
Oh yeah, of course the corporate media wants to say that Occupy is all but gone because they've basically gotten rid of the physical occupations throughout parks across our nation. What they don't realize is that was step one, that was the spark of the revolution. And revolutions take years, they don't take months. So although we may be done physically occupying parks throughout our country, there's still plenty of work getting done behind the scenes. We are saving families from losing their homes via foreclosure. We've stopped Bank of America from instituting $5 a month debit card fees, so we have made some small progress, and the progress continues. Just because we've gone indoors doesn't mean it's over. On that same note, I haven't gone indoors. I think it's very important to maintain a public presence, and every day, even if it's just you, don't wait for 100 or 500 people to go out on a march. That's great. But imagine individuals taking accountability, responsibility for themselves. And every day, going to the Department of Justice, or Monsanto, or BP, or the American Petroleum Institute, or Cargill, or any of these lobbies down on K Street. There's plenty of corruption, and you don't have to wait for a march or a protest to go take action. You can do it by yourself. Imagine individuals all across this country, every day, on your day off, going to one form of corruption or another. And you can throw a dart at a map of DC and hit corruption. There's plenty of it here. So don't wait for a march or an organized protest. Go out and embrace your individuality and fight these by yourselves. Granted, we are collective, but doesn't mean we can act individually either. Okay, let's do it.
Over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Occupy the Hood and community allies held a rally on September 30th with the motto, "Give love to the hood."
Well, I mean, first of all, we called it Takes a Village, and give love to the hood. We understand that, it's more than just one person to make change. It takes the whole community to make change. And if that's grandmoms, moms, dads, babies, brothers, sisters, cousins, pastors, store owners. You know, it takes everybody in the community to make change and to get the justice that we need. And one of the justices that we're fighting for specifically is the Derek Williams, and that's the death of a young 22-year-old man who was murdered by the hands of police. They broke his neck, and they allowed him to suffocate in the backseat of a police car, and the police officers got away with homicide. So that's just one of a few justices. We also was out here today to tell our own brothers that we need to stop the violence among ourselves, you know, because it's up to us to come together as a community to make our communities better. I would agree with them. You know, I would say most of the people, you know, who we encounter today don't really hear about the injustices on the news that we're talking about on a consistent basis. Yeah, you hear about the homicide, you hear about, you know, these kind of things, but you don't see somebody, like my brother said, you don't see somebody standing up and making a difference behind that. So I would think that was key. You know, it was people who wouldn't normally come to a meeting. It was people, you know, who sometimes normally don't watch the news. So they need to hear about the injustices, and when they heard about it, I think, you know, they was just excited that somebody was willing to do something about it, and they wanted to be a part of it. You know, I would say that it's up to everybody everywhere to make a difference, you know. And you don't have to be in the city of Milwaukee in order to be involved with us. You can start right there in your own backyard. You can start right there in your own neighborhood. You can start right there in your own community, in your own city, and begin to spark that change. And you may start with a little bit of numbers. You may start with 5. You may have 3. But whoever you have, channel that energy, and each one reach one. And when you reach one, you teach one. And I think that's where the difference will come in at.
The Peace and Respect March covered over a dozen city blocks to highlight the authoritarian violence inflicted on young men of color at alarming rates and to come together to eradicate the hate.
I'm here today because it's time for the hoods, the black people of Milwaukee, to wake up all over the nation, all over the planet of the African diaspora, to wake up and rise against brutalities against them, whether it's economic, whether it's structural, whether it's personal, internal. It's time for us to rise against that. And that's why I'm here, because if we don't fight for us, who will? The boy that was killed was 22 years old. A boy a couple months ago who was killed was 13 years old. My nephew here is 12 years old. That could have been him. So if we're not here for ourselves, our children, our future, then who will be? So it's imperative that we be here. It's imperative that we be here to fight on behalf of those who are younger than us. I'm only 22 myself. The boy who was killed in police custody was 22. That could have been me. That could have been my brother. That could have been my nephew or my niece. So I'm here on behalf of them, on behalf of myself, and on behalf of my people.
Speak-outs were held at each main street about specific issues and solutions with an overwhelming message of love, community, respect, peace, and build.
Police had choice. Derek had a voice. Divided we fall. United we stand. Divided we fall. United we stand. Divided we fall.
We're here to demand justice and police accountability. We're tired. We have a human right to safety and to safe communities and to be safe from government-sanctioned violence. And what we see in the case of Derek Williams and many other young black men across America is that the police are abusing their power. They are here to protect and serve. They are not here to impose police brutality on our young people. And so I'm here today to take a stand as a mother, as an activist, as a community member, as a sister, as a cousin. I'm here to take a stand and say that we want justice, we want peace in our communities. That means we want to be free from community and government-sanctioned violence. Okay, so what happened with Derek Williams? Derek Williams was a young 22-year-old man who was running. He got harassed by the police. He was beaten up. They broke a bone in his neck. He sat in the back of the police car where he suffocated as he asked police to help him. And so he suffocated, and well, the tapes say anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes. He continuously asked police to help him. So the question of the matter becomes, like, was he a criminal? And so that's really what plagues our community. People continue to ask, was he a criminal? Did he deserve it? And the fact of the matter is that no human being deserves to die as they beg for help. The right of police, or the job of the police, I'm sorry, I'm getting twisted up, because I'm really passionate about this. We are humans, bottom line. So he did not deserve to die to suffocate in the back of a police car. We are humans. So whether he was a criminal, whether he committed a crime, whether he didn't commit a crime, all of that is irrelevant. The police had a right to protect and serve him. That's it. And he had a human right to live.
The violence has to stop here. Healing, forgiveness, love has to start here. That's right. Everything that we do from this point forward has to be a step of love, forgiveness, unity, and peace. Not to forget justice. Because as I was thinking about my brother Israel, I was also thinking about Derek Williams, who didn't die at the hands of the streets, but died in the hands of the police. That's right. So this is not only a march for Israel, but it's also a march for Derek Williams, because there's no way that a young black man should die at the hands of those who are supposed to protect us. So I stand here for justice, unity, and peace.
Occupy locations across the United States have risen up time and time again on behalf of everyday people. The past 7 days prove the movement is active and working hard to better communities and to pave the way for another world in which social and economic justice, environmental protection, and peace reign. Occupiers tend to look at their actions as celebrations of the possible, rather than protests against the status quo. They tirelessly point out that there are more reasons than ever to occupy, meaning to dwell in places where the 1% do their corrupt dealings and refuse to leave. They ask of their fellow citizens, here and abroad, join the 99% as we create true democracy and reclaim our future and our world. Who'd have thought that the white so-called middle-class America would come to this? Police rubber bullets, baton beatings, CS gas, pepper spray, checkpoints and riot police who look better equipped to be on a battlefield than facing peaceful occupiers out for their rights. Main Street America used to be almost exclusively where ethnic minorities would be mistreated, arbitrarily arrested by a racist, corrupt police force and worse, murdered in cold blood. This is not to say that the mean streets have changed all that much, but they have produced another class of outcasts, the occupiers. The moment the New York cops pepper sprayed Chelsea Elliott inside an orange mesh, or kettled hundreds of protesters on Brooklyn Bridge, a new reality began to grip America, that it was no longer the minorities that were being beaten on to keep them from progressing to dreams considered above their station. Occupiers who by and large are white middle-class America would also have to be chastised for getting big ideas like making another world possible. The sheer weight of the state has come down on the occupiers ever since it realized that the occupation would not be leaving anytime soon. A heavy-handed Homeland Security alongside an army of operatives attempted to penetrate and disable the movement from the inside. Their long search for imaginary ringleaders came to nothing, since Occupy does not have an inside, a leadership structure, or indeed leaders. For Occupy, issues at home and abroad are the leaders. A body made up of the disaffected 99% of society began by addressing the financial disparity in the world's #1 economy. But soon, environmentalists and peace activists, among many other dissenting voices, joined the ranks. Each issue brought to the movement another group of Americans with realistic ideas to create a better world. Doctors, lawyers, university lecturers joined the grassroots movement to add voice to the chorus for change in the U.S. Washington's foreign policy came under the microscope just as much as the domestic affairs were looked into. While opposition to the war in Afghanistan, drone assassinations across the world, and a much-publicized intention to attack Iran were addressed by some, others protested their shrinking democratic rights under the U.S. corporatocracy. NDAA, H.R. 347, stop and frisk, and all too often the intrusive government eavesdropping program that followed the 9/11 events. Shortfalls in all layers of social services were also noticed. From education to Medicare, it became clear that every last dime had been directed toward wars overseas and the military-industrial complex, away from the very people whose taxes had propped up the country for years. So the Occupy movement rose from the awakening that all was far from well in America. When the corporate media's finest TV tricks failed to cover up the realities on the ground, when the U.S. economy collapsed under the weight of wars and a fraudulent Wall Street, when bankers concurred to steal from the poor to give to the rich. With much to lose, the ruling elite got to work. After all, without a leadership structure, the movement could not collapse from the inside, so it has transpired that crushing blows from the outside were decided on. Police intimidation, beatings, and thousands of arrests followed. Peaceful assemblies in city parks were banned, and heavy-handed tactics became routine. The white, middle-class America was in shock. The corporate mouthpiece media then started their campaign of denial to add insult to injury. Even protests with tens of thousands taking part were strangely missing from the evening news all of a sudden. The mistreatment of thousands of U.S. occupiers on the streets in broad daylight barely got a mention from the corporate media, but it was not all to their benefit. Social media rose to take millions of viewers away from the likes of BBC, CNN, Fox, and others, and to re-educate the public about what was actually going on in the world and how the 99ers' prospects were being crushed under the wheels of 1%ers' juggernaut. The final twist in the long line of inconsistencies and frauds that have preserved the ruling elite and their lackeys also seems to be coming from their mouthpiece media. The corporate media are beginning to write off the movement with every breath. The only time that Occupy receives a mention now is when some corporate channel or another feels obliged to write an obituary about the movement. The movement may have matured, and street actions may not be attended in the large numbers witnessed in the early days of Occupy, but the U.S. public is now aware of the facts without any chance of ever returning to the other camp. Occupy has brought about the vision of another world, and without vision, that world simply could not be possible.